Good morning, everybody. Welcome to week 10. Uh, I wanted to sort of jump right into it and say that this week's work is all about beginning research for the SA3 project. I take a second, take a step back, and just sort of say that a handful of students from this course have reached out to just sort of say, Mr. Murphy, I really am kind of lost about this project. And sure, it can seem a little opaque perhaps, but I think that once we actually start looking into answering some of the questions we may have about the train scenario, it'll become a little bit more clear. But if even like a couple of students are actually reaching out, asking these kind of questions, then I know probably many more in the class are there suffering silently. So let's just unpack this for a little bit. You have the situation of the train barreling down on a family who can't escape, and the person on the bridge who doesn't know why the family's there, doesn't know really what kind of train it is or what's on board, but there's a boulder, and if they want to push it, they can push it and it will wreck the train. And really, it's as, again, I kind of emphasized this last week, but it's as simple as that. A yes on push means that the train is stopped and the family is fine. A no on push means that the train is not stopped. And, besides that kind of yes or no choice, that kind of black and white choice, I'm really kind of leaving it up to you to figure out how to persuade somebody to agree with you about which decision is best. And so the first step, and the thing that brings research into this, is asking questions about what we're assuming and what we don't know and what we have to admit we're not experts on. There are a lot of things about this situation that kind of feel, correct. And to be fair, there's a lot of things about the situation that we might take as sort of common sense. The idea that it takes trains a long time to slow down, that kind of thing. I don't think we really need to research, because if you know anything about trains, you probably know things like that. But other things, like just if it is a freight train, how many people minimum are we talking about being on board? If it is a freight train, what kind of cargo is it? Do trains carry dangerous cargo? How many trains carry dangerous cargo? If it's not a freight train, is it a passenger train? How many lives are we, talking about being at risk here? Both in terms of just general, like how many people are on board a train, and what tends to happen to a train, passenger or freight train, when it crashes. And of course, we can't really answer many questions about, we can't know for sure what we're dealing with when it comes to this train. And the person on the bridge has to act or not act with that understanding. But as part of the research element of this, you can give yourself a good look at what we are likely dealing with, what we're most likely dealing with. And that's really the goal of doing research, is to just sort of visualize what the real risk of doing this is. Even if we can't know for sure what that train contains. And again, to be fair, it's not just about the train. We don't know how the family got there. We don't know. There's no good at like trying to guess, I think, about, well, maybe these people are criminals, or maybe these people are, on to cure cancer or something like that. Maybe the child would grow up and be president someday. Like those kinds of guessing games are not nearly as effective in arguing as going, well, let's look at how many incidents like this happen. Let's look at whether it's a common thing or whether it's more common than you might think. Let's even whether or not just why they're there, but why can't they get away? Why don't they hear the train and try to run? Well, is it a given that if you're on train tracks, you're just gonna hear it coming that easily? I mean, it feels right, but more people than us have thought about this, and more people than us have put information out there that might be useful to us as authors of this essay, to say, here is what I think we're dealing with. And so you've got the train, you've got the family and you've got the person on the bridge. What happens to them if they either don't act or do? What happens to somebody who sits there and watches a family get hit by a train? If anything, what happens to somebody who wrecks a train, even for a noble purpose like that? These are all things that are avenues for research. We can answer a lot of these questions, and we can say, given all of this, here's what I think we're dealing with, and here's whether or not I think it is worth the risk, or it is the right thing to do, or however it is frameable. But that's the goal. That's what you're looking into. And so for this week, we're just kind of starting with some general internet research. I know that I had you take the library tutorial, and we'll do library research next week. But for now, we'll just go ahead and admit that most often when you're doing research papers, the place that a lot of you are going to start is just Google. And so we might as well just start there. But you can't just Google something like this and pluck any old source off the internet and use it in a college essay. That's just not doable, especially from the internet, because there's just too much junk out there in the world. And so as you're doing this, there is a source citation or source evaluation scorecard that I've linked in the discussion post. It is basically just a worksheet, kind of a Cosmo quizzy thing where you answer a lot of the same kind of questions that you were, sort of instructed to answer on the source evaluation credibility check tutorial from the library last week. This is just a different version of that, asking different kinds of questions that are probably more geared toward the internet than anything else. But the goal of the discussion post, which is your only homework for the week, is to start answering some of these questions for yourself. Start asking, what is it that I don't know? What is it that I need to know? What is it that I'm not an expert on? Because even something like, well, there could be hundreds of thousands of people on a train. You need to know that for sure. Probably none of us in this class have ever worked on a train or for the freight or for the railroad system. So, even for seemingly silly things, you will need to be able to lean on somebody for that. So the goal is to find some sources and answer some of the questions that have presented themselves to you in this scenario. And as you do so, post links to those sources, because I'm going to use the discussion post from this week as kind of a class-wide repository. If you find some sources that another student looks at and says, I would like to, use those, they can just do it. And you can go to them and go, well, we found the same information, but they actually found it in a better source. So maybe I'll use their source as opposed to mine. Or maybe they addressed in their discussion post a point or an idea or an angle of this that you didn't, and you want to include that in your essay, and there's the source to help you do it. So that's the goal of it this week, but I don't want anyone to post any sources that don't hit at least an 8 on the source evaluation scorecard. They need to be at least on that ranking, possibly credible, most likely credible, right? Even for an internet source that is just answering kind of a very simple, straightforward question about a train. So help each other out, find some good sources, find some good sources for yourself. We will, before we even really begin writing the essay, I will ask you to compile the sources that you intend to use for the essay, according to the prompt. 4 sources minimum, but I tend to reckon that many more sources than that are needed for a thorough exploration of this rather silly but fun topic. So, and again, part of this essay is the argument. So as you're piecing this together and as you are coming to your opinion about this, think about how you're going to argue about this in your essay. Think about what sort of tactic you're going to take, what your ethos, pathos, and logos is going to be about, because that will be a factor in this project as well. So hopefully that answered a lot of your questions. If it doesn't, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to discuss this with anybody. In the meanwhile, only homework this week is the discussion post where we're beginning research. Let me know if I can help. See you next week.